I want to welcome everyone who is currently here. Hopefully everyone can hear me, and hopefully I'm coming through loud and clear. Again, thank you all for being here, and I'm going to be giving a very specific talk that is titled Seva Is My Dharma. And in a short time, as soon as I start my talk, you'll see very quickly why I chose to title this talk that. But again, thank you all for being here. Before I begin, first I would like to just offer several greetings to Bhagavan Srimad-Narayana, to Sri Guru, etc. Jaya Srimad-Narayana, Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna, Jaya Shri Guru, Sanatana Dharma Jayate, Dharma Rashtra Jayate, Suryavansha Jayate, Om Tad Vishnu Paramam Padam Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu Shri Vishnu Very good. So again, I'm going to be giving a special talk today, very specifically for our Discord server, and it's wonderful to see that so many people are here. I know it was slightly short notice. I believe we first made the announcement just a few days ago, so it's wonderful that so many people have been able to make it here, considering the somewhat short timing in announcing this. And what I'm going to be speaking about today is actually one of the most important concepts in Sanatana Dharma, and very specifically for Vaishnavas, for individuals who are devotees of Krishna, of Vishnu, of Srimad Narayana, etc. And that is the concept of seva, of service. You know, I'm sure many people have heard this term before, seva. And indeed, the translation of seva is service. Of course, not service in just any sense, not service as in when you go to a restaurant and a waiter is performing the service of being a waiter. No, that's not what the term seva means. Rather, it's, of course, a much deeper, much more philosophically important concept than merely service in the terrestrial or material sort of sense. Rather, what is meant by seva is very simply service toward God, service toward the divine and all that which is connected to God, to the divine. And, you know, again, I'm not going to go into much more of a definition for right now. Rather, a little bit later, we'll be going very deep into the definition of what precisely seva means, and how it differs from other practices, other concepts in Sanatana Dharma, even in Vaishnavism, actually, and why it is that this is so important. But first, before I get into the more deeply philosophical aspects of what is seva, as well as commenting on a few verses that I'll be commenting on, speaking about the idea of devotional service, before I do any of that, I want to explain to people why I chose this title, Seva Is My Dharma. This was chosen by me very specifically because it was something that, interestingly, someone said to me, a very very long time ago. At this point, about 35, 36 years ago. And this occurred when I was in India, actually. Sadly, I cannot quite remember if it was in 1985 or 86, but something tells me it was 1986. Because it was during that second visit that I went to India and stayed at my guru's ashram that I had many, many, many interesting, very interesting, life-changing things happen to me. So I want to think it was probably 1986. But to begin with this story, it was a very interesting thing. First of all, for anyone who has been to India, and really anywhere in India, but especially West Bengal, and especially West Bengal in the 1980s, it was a very, very interesting time. West Bengal in the 1980s, for those who, again, either were there or who just know this historically, West Bengal was sadly not a very good place. It was a place that had been ruled by the Communist Party of India, Marxist. That's the full name of this party. It was a Maoist party. And this party had already ruled West Bengal for, I'm not sure how long, at least 10 years, maybe more. And as a result, sadly, West Bengal at that time was a very oppressive place. It was not a very pretty place. It was very dirty. There was a lot of corruption, etc., etc. Basically, everything that comes into being as soon as communism comes to power was the case in West Bengal. Not quite as bad because the rest of India was not Marxist. So, of course, even the Marxists in West Bengal had to be a little bit careful. They couldn't be too totalitarian. But at the time, very specifically, as people who have been to India know, India is full of what are called rickshawalas. These are individuals who you pay them a fee and they have something that looks like a bike with 2 seats on the back, 2 large seats. It's almost like a little cart of some sort. And these are the taxis of India. At least this was the case, again, 35 years ago. And you pay them a little something and you tell them where you want to go and they take you. Well, sadly, rickshawalas really throughout India, but again, especially West Bengal, which was ruled by the communists, rickshawalas had a very bad reputation. These were individuals who, if they ever could, they would try to cheat you. They would try to ask you for more money than the trip was worth. They were, for the most part, pretty nasty people, etc. If you got on their wrong side, they could actually be quite violent with you. And they were all ruled by the trade union that, again, was run by the Communist Party. So they were like a little mafia. So as a result, for those Westerners who went to West Bengal especially, we understood this reputation. We understood that rickshawalas were individuals who, you have to be very careful, you have to haggle with them, and don't get on their bad side. Otherwise, you'll suddenly be surrounded by 30 rickshawalas with sticks in their hands. So in any case, especially when they saw a Westerner, of course, they would always try to charge them much more money than they would a native. So again, this was the situation, just to give you the background. Well, one specific day, when I was there and I was in my guru's ashram, I happened to be in the town market of Navadvip. And I can't remember exactly how far this was, maybe 20 minutes, half an hour from my guru's ashram. And after looking around for some time, doing a little bit of shopping, getting my supplies, etc., and I was with one of my godbrothers, it was time to go back to my guru's ashram. So here came the unfortunate process that we always had to go through every day of picking a rickshawala that looked like he wasn't going to kill us. So my friend and I kind of go and we kind of in a very wary way look at all these rickshawalas hanging around. And interestingly, even though I had been doing this pretty much every day, going into town or going someplace or another, visiting some other temple or some other ashram and then taking rickshaws everywhere, there was one specific individual who was there who I had not seen before. And he looked very different from the others. He was a young man. I would have to say maybe 25 or so, something like that. I couldn't really tell, maybe younger, maybe older, but around that age. But this person looked very different. The other rickshawalas were staring us down, and some of us were even starting to come up to us, and wanting us to use their service and talking to us. This other rickshawala, on the other hand, was very detached. And he was unlike any of the others. Well, I personally made the decision, all right, he's going to be the one to take us back. So my godbrother and I go to this rickshawala. And at the time, of course, both my godbrother and I are dressed as complete monks. You know, we're in dhoti, kurta, tilak, shaved heads, shikha, you know, the entire thing. So it was obvious that we were Western sadhus. But in any case, we went up to this one individual, and I said, could you take us? And his English was not perfect, but he could speak a little bit of English. And he said, yes, where do you go? Where do you go? And I said, oh, Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat. And he said, oh, yes, come, I take. So he knew where it was. So we got on the rickshaw, and he begins to bicycle us to our guru's ashram. And as we are going, again, I was observing this person because immediately I could tell that there was something very different about him. As we were going, he did not say a word. He looked straight forward, and he seemed to be very contented and very interiorized, for lack of a better word. He seemed to be just very satisfied in what he was doing. No need to chat, no need to talk, no need to look around. Many of the other rickshawalas, even as they were driving, sometimes they would even be smoking little bidis, what are called bidi, little Indian cigarettes. Not this person. Rather, he was just focusing on what he was doing. And as this continued in complete silence, I made a little bit of conversation with him, and I began speaking with him. And again, his English was not perfect, but he could speak some. And he then began to ask me some questions, and he began to ask, oh, so you stay at Gurudev's ashram? And I said, yes, that's right. Yes, my guru is B.R. Sridhar Maharaj. Ah, yes. Yes, very, very good. So you're Krishna Bhakta. And I said, yes, we are both Krishna Bhaktas. Ah, where are you from? Oh, America. I'm from America. And I forget where my godbrother was from. I think Sweden. But in any case, he was very interested in speaking to us about spiritual things, about my guru, etc. But again, in a reserved way. He wasn't engaging in animated conversation. To make a long story short, we finally arrive at my guru's ashram. And to give you a visual, this was the case at least in 1986. I don't know if it's changed now. But when you arrive at my guru's ashram from the street, of course, first you see a massive gate. If you look past the gate, you see the kirtan hall. And you can look right through the kirtan hall, and then there's a structure to the other side of the kirtan hall, and that is where the altar is. And you saw the murtis of Shri Radha Krishna. So, in other words, you can have darshana from the street. So, as soon as we stopped, my friend and I are still in the cart, and of course, we're looking for our money, etc. And this happened very quickly. This person, who was the rickshawala, who was taking us there, immediately, very quickly, got down from the rickshaw and walked toward the gate without saying a word to us. And he put his two palms together in pranama, obviously seeing Shri Radha Krishna and offering his obeisances to them. And he was there for some time in silence. And my godbrother and I forget if at that point we're still sitting, or I believe we maybe also got off at that point, got off of the rickshaw. And we're just kind of looking at each other and observing this rickshawala being very quiet. We didn't want to say anything. It was obvious that he was in prayer. And after some time of this, then finally he finished offering his obeisances to Radha Krishna. And he then finally walked to us with a very, very peaceful countenance, very peaceful face. And I wish I could remember exactly what I said to him, but I said something to the effect of, oh, that is absolutely wonderful. You were offering prayers to Radha Krishna, something like that I said to him, and he confirmed that, yes, I was. And I said, oh, that is wonderful. But at this time, we had to get back in because some program was about to start. So I reach for my wallet, and I have all these rupees, and I say to him, how much, please? And he looks at us, and he says, no, nothing, it is all right, nothing, it's all right. And with both my godbrother and I, our mouths pretty much fell open. Because again, this is why I gave you the long story of what rickshawalas are like and what we were accustomed to. This person did not want any money from us, which was astounding. I had never experienced this, my godbrother had never experienced this. And I said to him, are you sure? It's no problem. Please, how much do you want? In fact, if anything, in my mind, I was going to give him an enormous tip, actually. But again, he said, no, it's all right. No, please. And I said to him, why? Why don't you want money? And his answer to me was, no, this is my seva. Seva is my dharma. And that's what this man said to us. Seva is my dharma. Seva, service, is my way of being. So it was astounding to us, so astounding, that I remember this to this day, 35 years later, that this lowly rickshawala, I mean, let me tell you, like all the other rickshawalas, he was not dressed well. It was obvious that he was in quite some poverty. And despite that fact, this person, knowing that we were monks, knowing that we were going to this ashram, and himself having now offered obeisances to Radha Krishna, he did not want to take a penny from us. He saw doing service to Krishna and to Krishna's devotees. He saw this as his dharma, as literally his path, his way. So when he said that to me, it was 4 words that stuck to my mind and never left. Seva is my dharma. And for years, again, to this day, what is this, 2021? This was around 1986 that this happened. To this day, I remember those 4 words, and interestingly, I've contemplated those 4 words many times for all of this time. And the fact that these 4 words came from the mouth of, again, not a guru, not a great sage that I am aware of. Again, I never saw this person again. I didn't see him previous to this. I don't know who this actually was. But the fact that these 4 powerful words came from the mouth of someone so humble is something that truly stuck with me. And now, 35 years later, I'm giving a talk dedicated to these 4 words that came out of the mouth of a rickshawala. That Seva is my dharma. So this is why I'm giving this talk. This is where the title came from. So all that being said, let me talk a little bit now about what is the nature indeed of Seva. Again, this is a word that not only for Vaishnavas, absolutely for Vaishnavas, but throughout, let's say, the pan-Hindu context, the Vedic context as it exists today and for quite some time actually. Anyone who is Vedic, they've heard this term Seva, service. As far as exactly what it means, of course, like with so many terms, Vedic terms, today there's a lot of confusion about what this means. Some people think that it means just service in general, so, again, if you're an auto mechanic or something like that, you're doing Seva. And of course, no, that's silly. That's not the case. Seva is itself an extremely spiritual term, and service itself, by definition, means spiritual service. That service that has nothing to do with any material calculation whatsoever, but that in actuality is done as a purely spiritual motion, with spiritual intent and spiritual intent alone. So this is what is meant by service very specifically. But again, I want to go a little bit deeper into this. Seva is indeed the idea that we as spiritual beings should engage in service toward those other beings who themselves are purely spiritual in nature. That is, We should be engaging in service toward God. We should be engaging in service toward the Guru. We should be engaging in service toward our fellow devotees, toward other Vaishnavas. And then we should be engaging in service even to spiritual concepts. So, for example, we can be of service, in service to Dharma, and we can be in service even to spiritual institutions. So, for example, of course, the example I will necessarily give is the International Sanatana Dharma Society. This being a purely Vedic and spiritual institution, we can indeed be of service to institutions. When Prabhupada was here, and sadly only when Prabhupada was actually physically on the planet, a little bit less so afterwards, doing service to ISKCON was indeed Seva, because the Guru was present. When my Guru was present, I did service for the Sri Chaitanya Saraswat Mat, his institution, his organization. That also was Seva. So again, this is what is meant by Seva, not merely charity. Oh, there are too many people, sadly, neo-Hindus, i.e. individuals who have practiced Hinduism the way it's been corrupted for roughly the last 150 to 200 years, being very much influenced by some of the worst ideas of the Western world, including Marxism, radical egalitarianism, etc., universalism. Many neo-Hindus sadly have this idea that service simply means humanitarian work. Indeed, Prabhupada himself, as well as Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, as well as my Guru, B.R. Sridhar Maharaj, all spoke about this unfortunate misconception that many contemporary Hindus have, that what seva or service means is simply, uplifting the poor, or working at a soup kitchen, or being a politician and trying to fight for quote-unquote equality among all people, etc. Well, needless to say, that's not seva. None of this is seva. None of this is service in the spiritual sense. It might be charity, it might be activist work of either a positive or a negative nature. If it's Marxist inspired, then of a negative nature. But none of this is actually seva per se. Rather, seva, by definition, is that service that is aimed toward that which is purely spiritual. So again, toward God, toward Guru, toward fellow Vaishnavas, and toward those dharmic concepts and institutions that have stood the test of time. When you do service toward these objects of service, then and only then are you doing seva proper. Otherwise, you're doing something else. Again, you're doing charity, which is important. Actually, it's important to engage in charity, very much so. Dhanam. Dhanam is the Sanskrit term for charity. Very important. But charity is never to be confused with service. Again, service in and of itself is a purely spiritual motion. It's a purely spiritual activity. And before I go deeper into that, actually, just a few more things I want to say, making a few distinctions in terms. Because, of course, as you know, when speaking philosophically, we always have to, first of all, we have to define our terms. We have to make sure that we know what all of our various terms are and what is the similarity, difference between them, etc. I've had people in the past, for example, ask me, well, what is the difference, what are the similarities between karma yoga versus seva? Are they the same thing? Is karma yoga seva? Because, of course, for those individuals who know a little bit about karma yoga, who have read about karma yoga, either in Bhagavad Gita or other Vedic scriptures, etc., it may seem on the surface to be somewhat similar. However, the truth of the matter is, they are not. Seva is different from karma yoga. Karma yoga is not seva per se. It can lead towards seva, but it is not seva per se. And seva certainly is infinitely beyond the nature of mere karma yoga. Now, why is this the case? Well, let's start with karma yoga. When it comes to karma yoga is precisely that. It is a yoga. It is a sadhana technique meant to use one's activities in a meditative way, in such a way that you are doing sadhana, practicing having God in the center, of your awareness and of your consciousness as you are engaged in action. That is karma yoga. So thus karma yoga is of the nature of yoga itself, so thus karma yoga, and it is of the nature of sadhana practice, of actual practice. Now, seva, on the other hand, while seva is something that we must practice, it is not of the nature of practice. In other words, seva in its purest form, certainly in the beginning stages, it can be used in conjunction with karma yoga as a sadhana, but seva in and of itself, practiced purely, is not merely a sadhana. In other words, its goal is not even merely to improve ourselves spiritually. That is not the goal of pure seva, shuddha seva. Rather, seva is of the nature of pure bhakti, of pure devotion, of pure love. Ultimately, the way that we bring seva, or devotional service, to its perfection is indeed by performing seva out of love of God alone. And not as a sadhana, not merely, I should say, as a sadhana. Obviously, it's something that will improve us. Obviously, it's something that will benefit us. But again, pure seva is something that we do not merely with the goal, with the idea of benefiting ourselves, but of benefiting that which is the object of our seva. That's the difference. That is the difference. So with seva, our goal is to benefit that which is the object of our seva, of our service. So thus, even when we are doing seva toward God, does God need that seva? Well, we know the answer to that. Of course not. Does God need for us to serve Him? And let's talk about the highest liberation, serving God personally, massaging God's feet, fanning God with a peacock feather fan, doing any kind of personal service like this. Is this something that God needs from us? No, of course. He loves and appreciates the reciprocity of love that takes place. But the truth of the matter is, of course, we are benefiting ourselves by quite literally serving God personally. But this is the only difference. Well, this is the main difference between seva versus karma yoga. We are not engaging in seva to benefit ourselves. We are engaging in seva selflessly, to benefit, quote unquote, God. Of course, God doesn't need what we're doing. It's not that there's actual benefit. It's not that God is dependent upon our seva. But in our minds, thinking devotionally, thinking through love, we are thinking, yes, I love God so much that if I am not fanning God right now, if I am not in Vaikuntha, in Goloka Vrindavana sector of Vaikuntha, and I am not personally fanning Krishna, Krishna might get hot and start to sweat. I don't want that. That's terrible. You see, this is how the bhakta is thinking. So thus, I think we're beginning to understand what is the nature of seva. Karma yoga is motivated by duty. We do, as Krishna explains to Arjuna, we do out of pure duty. Not caring for the results, not caring for the fruit of our action. In a very detached way, we do our duty. And we do our duty via yoga, the yoga of meditative action, in such a way that we will benefit ourselves, remove our anarthas, and slowly come to the point of self-realization and God consciousness. That's karma yoga. With seva, on the other hand, we do seva, not even out of duty, but out of devotion, out of absolute pure love for Bhagavan Sri Krishna. This is why we do seva. It's not duty, it's devotion. Now, all this being said, I want to just talk about several different aspects of seva. I think hopefully now at this point we're beginning to understand what is the essence, the spiritual essence of actual seva versus karma yoga versus anything else. What to speak of charity or activism or anything like this. But now let me talk about several different forms of seva, because seva, like everything else, seva is not merely seva, is not really seva, it's not all one, it's not all the same. But we can see distinctions between various forms of seva. First, there is seva, very generally speaking. So, for example, when a person is very new to the path of bhakti yoga, and when they are engaging in seva, and they are indeed engaging in seva in a way where, on the one hand, they want it to be something that is done purely out of love of God, but at the same time, it's tinged a little bit with the idea of some self-improvement. So, thus, this seva also is done as a type of sadhana as well. This is a very general sort of seva, when a person is just beginning to do service in this way. That's the first aspect of seva. The second aspect is what is called guru seva, and that is either direct service to the guru himself, and that means quite literally helping the guru, being there for the guru, serving the guru in every way, but it also means serving the guru's mission as well. Again, I gave the examples earlier of Prabhupada's ISKCON, and I have to, emphasize that when Prabhupada was here and in charge of ISKCON, or my guru's institution when he was alive. It is also by serving the mission of the guru that you are engaging in guru seva. The next thing that I want to mention is what I have mentioned several times, and that is, let's say, a form of sadhana seva. That is the idea of doing seva either in order to benefit ourselves spiritually and to continue to grow spiritually, but also one can actually, interestingly, do a very pure form of seva in a sadhana mode. And this is very, very, way too deep to go into too much, because truthfully, this is something that we can go very deeply into. There are many techniques of doing what amounts to pure seva, but in sadhana mode, that is ritually, etc. I'll only give one example of these. One example is what is called Manusa Seva. That is, while an individual, being a yogi, being a sage, being a person who is on the path doing their sadhana, before they're actually liberated and thus having the ability to serve God directly, there is a way that we can actually serve God as a meditation. This is a technique known as Manusa Seva. In other words, visualizing, worshiping, and quite literally serving God in one's mind-eye deep in meditation. This is an actual technique. This is a Vaishnava technique. Indeed, there are many stories in the history of Vaishnavism where you have yogis who will do this, i.e., they go very deeply into meditation, and this is a form of sadhana, but it's very pure, in which, in your mind's eye, you begin to do what in the West is sometimes called visualization. This is actually infinitely beyond what in the West we would call a visualization, but still, it's with the idea that in your mind's eye, you quite literally envision that you are in Goloka Vrindavana, and there is either Krishna or Radha Krishna, and maybe some of the gopis are present, maybe some of the gopas, the cowherd boys, are present. And you can envision, for example, that Radha and Krishna are seated on a beautiful throne, and that they have beautiful flower garlands upon them, and you are there literally serving them. So again, maybe with a fan, maybe you're fanning them, maybe you're massaging their feet, maybe you're bringing them some fruits, a bowl of fruits, or some water, or some nectar to drink, etc. Well, this is a very valid technique. Again, throughout the history of Vaishnavism, there are many, many very famous Vaishnavas who engaged in this technique of Manusa Seva. Manusa Seva meaning service within the mind in meditation. So this is yet another form of seva. And then finally, of course, there is Bhagavata Seva. There is service toward God Himself. Quite literally, service toward God Himself. And now when we speak of this Manusa Seva, this also consists of two forms. That is, this Bhagavata Seva. When we speak of this Bhagavata Seva, it exists in two forms. There is what I just spoke about, Manusa Seva, where you're doing it in your mind, but it's still direct service to God. But then, finally, there is the actual direct service toward God. And for the most part, and I have to say for the most part, there are exceptions, this occurs, of course, upon liberation. And not just liberation, but going to Vaikuntha, Once you're in Vaikuntha, it is at that point that you are directly serving God. And again, there are a few exceptions. So, for example, for individuals who are very pure devotees, and for example, they have a very special relationship with a very specific Archa Vigraha, what's called an Archa Vigraha, that is God, Krishna, Sriman Narayana in Murti form, for example. It can come to the point where, as a truly pure bhakta, you have such a deep and living and personal relationship with that Murti to the point where, indeed, you are serving God directly. Without via medium, you are quite literally serving God directly in the form of that Murti, but for you, of course, that is not a Murti, that is quite literally God. So again, there are several exceptions, etc. But these are indeed the various ways in which we can engage in Seva. So, all that being said, all this was, however long this took, almost 40 minutes, this was by way of preface. Now, very quickly, and truly this will be quick, I do want to just look at several verses from the Vedic scriptures, and very specifically from Srimad-Bhagavatam, that also explain even more deeply what is the nature of Seva, what is the nature of devotional service. So with that, so the first verse is from Srimad-Bhagavatam, and this is Canto 4, chapter 24, verse 55. And this verse proceeds in this way. My dear Lord, pure devotional service is even difficult for liberated persons to discharge. But devotional service alone can satisfy you. Who will take to other processes of self-realization if he is actually serious about the perfection of life? So, very beautiful verse, again from the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and this is describing precisely how important is the concept and the discharge of service, of seva, of devotional service toward God. To the point where, again, indeed, this verse explains that even for some individuals who are liberated, and what does this mean? Well, this means what we call Mayavadis, Advaitins, for example, who, officially they may be liberated, but they don't really have great devotion per se toward Krishna. So thus the concept of seva is something that is still somewhat foreign to them. Even for liberated persons, actually, to engage in seva in this form of pure devotional service at the feet of Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the likes of which we've just been describing for the last at least half an hour, 40 minutes, it's very, very difficult for them. So this is why we have to understand how exalted this path of seva, of service, is. It's something that not everyone can do. And indeed, this verse ends by saying, who will take to other processes of self-realization if he is actually serious about the perfection of life? So, stating this in the form of a question, if you're serious about wanting to achieve the perfection of life, why would you even bother with other processes? That's what this verse is saying. So, pretty straightforward. We're not going to spend a lot more time with that. Let's go on just a little bit more. Now this is, again, all these verses are from Srimad-Bhagavatam. This next one also is Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 1, chapter 2, verse 7. And it proceeds in this way. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Vasudeva, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. So again, here we also are speaking of seva in a way as sadhana. Seva as sadhana, but the purest form of sadhana that one can engage in. So what this verse is saying very specifically is it's displaying several of the benefits that an individual can have from engaging in seva. And two very specifically. That is that such an individual acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. By causeless knowledge, what is meant by that very simply is knowledge that is knowledge that is not dependent in nature, i.e. knowledge which is not material in nature. You see, all material knowledge is dependent. That is, it's factual in nature. A datum of knowledge doesn't exist simply on its own power alone, but rather it exists due to all of the various interactions of materiality and conceptuality within this world. So, therefore, material knowledge is caused knowledge. What is meant by causeless knowledge is indeed that which is eternal wisdom, true knowledge. So thus, when an individual engages in devotional service, they therefore have causeless knowledge, i.e. they have eternal wisdom, and they have detachment from the world. In other words, it is by engaging in service that we now transcend our needs in this world. We have detachment from this world. We now have the ability to grasp on to that which is purely transcendent. We literally, through Seva, have the ability to grasp on with our hands to the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Krishna himself and not let go. So these are two of the benefits. Now let's go on a little bit more. But here's the next verse. This is again Srimad-Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 17, and verse 28. And this is how this verse proceeds. Devotees solely engaged in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana, never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same, for such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord. This explains the mentality, the mindset of the bhakta, of the devotee engaged in devotional service. And very, very beautiful. So first of all, indeed, in the Sanskrit itself, the name that it uses for God is Narayana. This is Prabhupada's translation. So those devotees who are solely engaged in the devotional service of Narayana, first of all, they never fear any condition of life. In other words, fear is gone. Bhaya. Fear, bhaya, becomes abhaya. Fear becomes the opposite of fear, no fear. So all fear is gone when we engage in that service toward God. And then this second sentence is very powerful. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same. In other words, an individual devotee who is engaged in devotional service to God now has such a sense of fearlessness, of detachment, to the point where it does not matter to them where they are even situated, just so long as wherever they are situated, they are engaged in devotional service toward God. And to them, they are satisfied wherever they are. They are satisfied if they find themselves in a palace. They are satisfied if they find themselves sitting under a tree. They are satisfied in whatever conditions they find themselves, as long as one criterion can be fulfilled in their hearts and in their minds, and that is that they at all times are engaged in service toward the lotus feet of Bhagavan Sri Krishna. Otherwise, nothing else matters. And why? Again, this last clause explains what I just explained. For such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord. Very good. Very nice. Well, with that, I believe that we're going to end here. And if I can, let me just say one last thing in ending. But that will be the end of the verses that I'll be commenting on. And that is to make this a very, very practical thing. And that is, I know that many of the individuals who are here on this Discord server, the ISDS Discord server, Dharma Nation Discord server, are individuals who yourselves, you are extremely sincere, you're extremely good individuals, you are individuals who want to grow spiritually in every way and more. Not just grow for yourselves personally, but I know, because I know many of you, not all of you, I know that many of you also are people of mission. That you are individuals who, in addition to helping yourself to grow spiritually, you also want to help to save this world. to restore Dharma to this world and to help to bring about a golden age. And as a result, I know that many of you indeed are very eager to engage in precisely what we were talking about, in Seva, in devotional service. And that being the case, I want to encourage you to please continue to do service specifically for the ISDS. Many of you already are in a variety of ways. And again, I know this for a fact because I know who quite a few of you are, and you have been helping in ways that have revolutionized what we are doing as a mission to bring Dharma to this world. I want to first of all encourage those of you who are already helping and doing this seva to please continue, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart. And for those of you who have not yet committed yourself to doing some seva, doing some service to help us, I also want to encourage you, please help us in whatever way you can. If you have even a little bit of extra time, you see, we don't need to make this a full-time job. You don't have to worry that you have to help the ISDS, that you have to serve Dharma 8 hours a day. No, on the contrary. If you have an hour a week, 2 hours a week, whatever spare time you have, please help us. You can help us in so many ways. First of all, speak to our moderators who are there on the Discord server. They will tell you where they can use your help. That's the first thing I would suggest. Talk to them. And it should be obvious who the moderators are. Speak to them, ask them, how can I help? How can I help? How can I help? With eagerness like that. But then just generally speaking, let me tell you, you can help to restore Dharma to this world in a variety of ways. First of all, by spreading everywhere and anywhere you are on social media, on the internet, spread all of our links, the links to every individual video that we have on our Dharma Nation channel, our BitChute channel, etc. Spread the links to the channels themselves. Engage in book distribution. That is, again, spread links to all of our many, many books. Introduction to Sanatana Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, the Eternal Natural Way, etc., etc. More, purchase multiple books and either give them as gifts to others or even sell them on your own if you want. The important thing is distribute. Do as much book distribution as you possibly can. In addition, invite others to our live stream. You know, every Monday we do a live stream. Every Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time. Please invite others to come. Others who are sincere. You know, they have to be sincere, otherwise they won't be benefited. But invite individuals who are sincere, who are good-hearted, spiritually inclined people to the live stream, etc. Become a member of the ISDS, the International Sanatana Dharma Society. I mention this every week on our live stream. This is one of the most practical ways in which you can help us. We have a movement. We need donations. We need your help financially and in every way. There is no movement upon the face of the earth that does not need donations. And if someone claims that's the case, they're lying. They're lying. No, please consider becoming a member of the ISDS and just tithe something every month. It can be $5, it can be $100, it can be anything that you desire. But please help us in that way. And then finally, if you feel so inclined, feel free to move here to the Omaha area as a part of our Vedic Heartland initiative and become part of what we are hoping in the future will be a vibrant and wonderful Vedic community here in the Omaha area. But with that, now I officially end my talk.